Good evening. I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., CEO of Black Enterprise. Welcome to the latest installment of the Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall Series, Closing the Wealth Gap. Our topic for this town hall, Black Media Matters, are corporations delivering on economic equity pledges. As the #1 Black digital media brand, reaching more than 12 million unique visitors per month, we are committed to dissecting issues of racial equity through a business lens with a clear, intentional objective: developing solutions to drive lasting Black economic and financial empowerment. To mark the ongoing racial reckoning birthed from the murder of George Floyd, we at Black Enterprise are staying true to our 50-plus year mission, facilitating candid, no-holds-barred conversations with the best subject matter experts from business, politics, civil rights, social thought leadership, and beyond. Today, we are focused on commerce between major corporations and Black-owned companies, and in particular, Black-owned media. Corporate America's legacy, prior to just a generation ago, of refusing to spend or engage in fair business practices with African Americans, is a clear and direct contributor to the establishment of our nation's racial wealth gap. At $171,000, the net worth of a typical white family is roughly 10 times greater than that of a Black family at only $17,150. As entrepreneurship is a proven pathway to wealth creation, the role of major corporations in creating an ecosystem of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a necessary component of closing this gap. This is especially the case when it comes to corporate America and the global advertising agencies that represent them doing business with Black-owned media companies, a force multiplier of advocacy, economic growth, and wealth creation for Black America. To that end, this evening's discussion will focus on what progress has been made toward fulfilling economic equity and racial justice pledges made by major corporations to do more business with Black-owned companies, with a specific focus on Black-owned media. What is required of agencies and their clients, respectively, in order to bring equity to spending with Black-owned media? And what will be required of us as Black-owned business owners and consumers in order to make progress and hold corporate America accountable for delivering on its pledges? We are once again extremely excited to have a 5-star panel to engage in this urgent conversation. This evening's town hall speakers include Walton Isaacson, co-founder and CEO, Aaron Walton; Group M Multicultural President, Gonzalo Delfa; General Motors Diverse Media Strategy and Investment Lead, Brienne Bowles Marshall; and Publicis Media President of Integrated Solutions, Mr. Jason Smith. We also invite you to join this important conversation by sharing your questions and comments via the chat feature. Now it is my great privilege to serve as the moderator for this discussion. So without further delay, let's get started. Welcome, gentlemen and lady, to this town hall. What I'd like to do first is I'm going to have each of you give a brief background of yourself before I get into the questions. So I'm going to start, Bree, since you're the lady here on this.
Ladies first, huh?
Ladies first. Bree, please introduce to the audience and give them a little bit more about what you do and who you are.
Sure. Well, before I give you an introduction of what I do, let me give you a little bit of who I am. Again, my name is Brienne Bowles Marshall. I am a Michigan girl, born and raised in Flint, Michigan. I am a daughter of General Motors, so this is a homecoming of sorts for me, working at this company. Several family members, my father, are Heritage General Motors folks. I have 3 beautiful children, two twin 4-year-old boys and a daughter who's 1. And I live with my husband. We're doing this twin and baby thing together. So that's a little bit about who I am. What I do in my background is specifically in media strategy and investment, with a keen eye to diverse media strategy and investment. It has been a passion point of mine since entering into this field. I've never not touched it for any client that I've worked on when I was agency side. So it's great to be able to live and breathe that fully here at General Motors and to affect change in this role, which General Motors created specifically for the purpose of ensuring that we are meeting, if not exceeding, our stated goals.
Outstanding. Aaron?
Good morning. First of all, thank you for including me on this incredible panel and for being a part of this amazing, important topic. I think that only Black enterprise could actually bring to the forefront and really kind of continue to champion. A little bit about my background. I'm the CEO of Walton Isaacson, which is an advertising, full service advertising agency. I have one partner that some of you may know named Magic Johnson. He has been with us since the very beginning. We started this agency 19 years ago, actually celebrating our 19th year in business. A little bit about my personal background. I started my marketing career at Pepsi-Cola Company. Right after graduating from Babson College, I went to serve as an analyst at Pepsi and then ultimately kind of moved into the marketing and advertising divisions for Pepsi before deciding I really wanted to go out and start my own company. This is the second company I've had. The first company I started was AWE, which really focused more on celebrity and music kind of sponsorships. I did that for a number of years and then really got the bug to not only start to put these partnerships together, but I wanted to start to execute them. I didn't want to just do the work for someone else, but I really wanted to be involved in the creation of the content. And so we started this company 19 years ago and have some amazing clients, including Lexus, McDonald's, American Airlines, and a myriad of different clients throughout the country. We're at about 130 team members across the country. I used to tell everyone we used to have 4 offices across the country, but now because of how we're kind of evolving and working, everyone's kind of working from home in a hybrid environment. So now I tell everyone we have 130 offices across the country. So really looking forward to this discussion and connecting with this great panel.
Thank you, Aaron. Gonzalo.
Thank you, Butch, and thanks for having me here. And a pleasure, sharing this panel with these amazing professionals. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Argentina. I've been living in the US for the last 25 years. I actually started my career on the client side, working for American Express. Then I moved into the media side. So I was on your side, Butch. I know sometimes it's painful, but it was fun. And I finally moved into the agency side. And I've been working on the multicultural space, I would say, for the last 20 years. Very passionate about it. We know that probably we are having this conversation now for all the wrong reasons. But I'm excited that this is now top of mind and that you are driving, these kind of conversations. So everyone is aware of what is happening, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and in which, part of the journey we are. So again, lovely to be here and super excited to have this conversation today.
Thank you, Gonzalo. And Jason?
Thank you, Butch, for having me. This is wonderful. Looking forward to our conversation today, and what a great panel. I mean, these are folks that I've either worked with or have come across in the industry, and all of you all have really been at the forefront of inclusion and marketing for many, many years. So this is not new to any of you all. A little bit newer to me, though, actually, because, my background has been mostly agency side and did a little bit of ad tech sales as well for a global database company. And now I lead our business operations and new business development for Publicis Media across both of our agency brands. And I've also been a big part of an initiative that we launched at Publicis that's called Once and For All Coalition. And Butch, thank you for being a big part of that, leading the way. So thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. So I'm going to start, Gonzalo, with you and have you try to frame, because you have a very rich history and not just focusing on African-American media, but multicultural media as a whole, and have been involved. It's interesting. It's kind of propped up the last 2 to 3 years as being, oh, this is a real focus now for corporate America, although it's existed for a long period of time. It just, the attention wasn't brought to it. But would love to get your sense of what has changed, if anything, in your career as it relates to multicultural marketing, the importance of it, and why do you see it being brought to the forefront now, not suddenly, but moreover now, with an import? Does it seem to be an acceptance that, oh my God, this market actually is fairly valuable? And I'm not going to speak for you, but would love to have you frame, because you've had a long history in multicultural marketing. You didn't just get started in this right after George Floyd. This has been something you've been doing for decades.
Yeah, and again, it's funny because we talk about multicultural, and I feel that in some way we need to change the name. I think we need to start talking about inclusiveness or inclusion, or how do we really talk to all audiences? And you're right. I mean, I've been doing multicultural, which probably 20 years ago, it was mostly about Hispanic. And then it began adding the different segments. And I always say the same, why was that way? Yeah, we can keep asking ourselves. I just like to look to the future more than analyzing the past. I like to learn from the past to do a better future. And I think that the murder of George Floyd was really the tipping point for companies and people to realize that they cannot just keep ignoring actually a very large part of the population, but also the part of the population that is driving the growth of this country. And I want everyone, and again, I know your audience is pretty savvy, but I just want to highlight that based on the census that just came out from 2020, 100% of the growth of this country came from multicultural audiences, or from minorities, as we used to call it, Black, Hispanic, and Asians. So we cannot keep ignoring this. And I think we worked for many years in demonstrating the business opportunity. What companies are realizing is it is about the business, but it's also a social responsibility to bring all these people together, not to exclude anybody, and talk to those that are actually going to help their brands grow in the today and in the near future. So I think that the shift that we've seen in the last 2 years, it was basically companies realizing that they haven't done the right thing, they haven't spoken to the right people, and they have been basically, separating this audience that it is a business imperative, but it's also a social responsibility that they need to bring to the table. So as part of this conversation is when we started talking about, Black-owned media, diverse-owned media. How do we keep a healthy balance between the large corporation and the smaller corporations? How do we bring everyone to the table, and how we give everyone the fair and right opportunity?
Can I say something, Butch?
Sure, please.
I agree with Gonzalo, and he made me realize, and that question was really great, because the other part of it is that people are talking about the value exchange, right? They're starting to understand, certainly consumers are, but Gonzalo's right. Corporations have started to wake up and understand that consumers are no longer just buying a product for its efficacy. They're also aligning their values with their purchases, and they're letting corporations understand who they are and what that stands for. And particularly with Black consumers, it is becoming even more vocal and more important. So what Gonzalez is saying is right. It's also being driven by consumers holding these companies accountable and making sure that they are living up to the very values that they want to see. And part of that is making sure that they're seeing representation of their culture in media that matters to them. And so I couldn't agree with Gonzalo more. And I think it's not going to let up from a consumer standpoint, and companies are going to have to continue, if they want to succeed, to deliver on what their own values are. And in exchange, there's loyalty that goes with that, right? And
Right.
That's what these companies want. They want loyal consumers. So they're going to have to continue to live their true values.
Brianne, I'm gonna ask you a question first. And listen, I've known many of you for a long period of time, and you guys know I tell you, like it is. I don't pull punches along the way. But so Brianne, you have the unique position in that you're not on the dark side of things like my other friends are, who are on the agency side. You're on the client side. Although Aaron has been on all sides of things, but I'm going to put that aside for a moment. I'm not going to chat about the agency element yet, but you are on the client side and have a unique position. And because, 2.5 years ago, General Motors was one of the first companies that came out to say, we're going to address this, right? We're not going to kind of sweep this under the rug. We're going to address this. Would love to get your point of view as terms of not just from the standpoint of why it's important to General Motors, but why it's important to you in your position to make sure that this is addressed, because these consumers that Aaron refers to are essential to bring on as loyal customers to your brand, right? And then they are making decisions and they have options and choices based off of what a client does. It's not like they only have one, they can choose any color car they want as long as it's black. They've got numbers of different options. So I'd love to get your perspective being on the client side in regards to how this topic is being addressed and looked at.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I will say the importance has always been there. The emphasis is not. And now we're in a situation, and I shouldn't say situation, but we're in a position, but there's an opportunity there to make sure that we match the importance with the emphasis. As everybody has noted on the panel, either by stating or by nodding their heads, multicultural consumers are critical to business and industry, whether you're automotive or not. This is not an audience segment that you can bypass and realize growth for your own organization. And it shouldn't even be for the purpose of just being transactional, right? We believe at General Motors, it's just the right thing to do. We have not, as a society, for the longest of time, in advertising and media and marketing, we've tried to wrap everybody under this total market umbrella, right? We say total market, and I'm with you, Gonzalo. There have been a lot of what I call dog whistles, right? When you say urban, who do you mean? When you say multicultural, who do you mean, right? When you say total market, who do you mean? Or general market, who do you mean, right? These are all dog whistles for segments that we've been targeting in media and marketing. But it's time for us to, as a company, as a global economy, it's time for us to be specific and dedicated and authentic in our approach to consumer segments who are looking to see themselves reflected in our products. And they can't see themselves reflected in our products if we don't do the work to understand who they are, what's important to them, how do our products speak to them uniquely, and how can we educate them on that? Like, we do have something for you based on what your expressed interests are or needs are. And so our family of brands have done a really good job of really amplifying and rallying around that. And our investment has really led the way. To your point, Butch, standing flat-footed and saying, hey, within the Black-owned media space, we're looking to invest 2% as we had done in 2021. We're looking to grow that this year to 4%, which we're on pace to meet. And by 2025, we should be at 8%, if not higher. And all of these are floors, right? These are floors and not ceilings, because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to make sure that these segments are invested against in leveraging those Black-owned and Black-owned companies who know how to authentically reach their audiences. At Black Enterprise, you do it well because you know how to do it well. You aren't new to this, you're true to this. You've been doing this for a very long time. You have the expertise. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to partner. We need to collaborate with you. We need to pull in. Everybody in is our rallying cry at General Motors, and we mean that. Every, which is inclusivity, body. Let's all come together to be one body and everybody in. And so we don't need to be siloed. We don't need to look at things monolithically either. We need to work together, find those ways in, and speak authentically to Black and diverse owned audiences.
If I may.
Go ahead. Yes, please, Gonzalo, please.
I'd like to make a couple of comments on some things that Brian said. One of the things that, and again, that's why I started saying we need to change the way we talk about what we do. And it's very, I would say, rooted saying, oh, this is the multicultural team. What is multicultural? Is it about ethnicity? Is it about underrepresented audiences? It's about whatever is not white and straight. Whatever we want to define, we need to change the names, because then the other challenge I face quite often, and again, Brian talk on this about, we talk about total market, we talk about the general market. When you have a campaign that is dedicated to the Black audience, we call it a Black campaign. When you have a campaign dedicated to the Hispanic audience, it's a Hispanic campaign. When you have a campaign dedicated to white people, it's general market. It's not general and it's not a market. So we need to eradicate the whole idea of general market, because the general market today is clearly not white, when almost 45 or more than 45% of the population is not white in this country. On top of that, it's going to keep changing. When people say there's a new majority that is going to come, to life in 2048, yeah, it is true that around 2040 something, more than 50% of the population of the US is not going to be white. But today, that population that is 18 years old or younger is already minority majority. The group of 1834, probably the sweet spot for every brand that is out there, it's 48% not white. So what is general market? So that's one of the things that I think we need to start, really, keep hammering on. So we moved into a real world and not a world that was built this way 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. The other one that I think Brian made a great point when she said, do the right thing. And I think one of the things we face most of the times is a little bit of a gap between top management and a company and the guys that run the different brands that belong to that company. And I think we need to evaluate things in a little bit of a different way. Historically, companies have been running their brands and checking how successful they are based on ROI, return on investment. And in many cases, it's through their MMM models or any of the marketing models they have in place. But then the corporation as a whole has many times larger goals than just the return on investment. So I've been kind of preaching about, one thing is the return on investment, which is a pure business, money related, a way of measuring how successful your brand is. But as a corporation, you should look at return on objectives, because the objectives are much larger than the return on investment you're having on a given brand. So I think that if we start moving the market into really understanding what the market looks like and stop talking about the general market / white America, we're going to make a lot of progress. And then inclusivity is going to come and happen in a much more dynamic way. And the other one is, let's not get stuck in the ROI, how many dollars I get out of every dollar I invest, which is very valid, But as a corporation, you should go beyond that, because doing the right thing, of course, it's about doing a business that is profitable, but it's also checking other boxes, which is, are you talking to everybody? Are you giving everybody the same opportunity? Are you, diverse enough in your corporation, giving other people the same opportunity that you've been giving to a different segment? So anyway, I wanted to highlight those two things that are very close to
Oh,
what
that's
Brian
great.
said.
That's
By the way,
great.
doing the right thing does not mean that it's not going to be a profitable thing. McKinsey did a research study years ago and showed that companies that are more ethnically diverse are more likely to outperform their competitors by 27%. I believe it was 27%. Companies that were more gender diverse were going to outperform their competitors by 34%. So doing the right thing, yes, it's important and it makes us feel good and it makes the culture of our companies better, but it has a bottom line impact to our companies. And if we have a fiduciary responsibility to lead those companies and to drive revenue and to drive, then that should be, to your point, it has to be part of our objectives and it should be part of our ongoing business strategy to do it. So I don't separate the two,
No.
doing the right thing and profitability. They are very much connected.
Yeah, and I want to pose the next question to you, Jason, but I agree 100%, Aaron and Gonzalo and Bree on, we do need to lose this notion of what, quote, general market is, right? And or the word core, right? I've had more people say, well, we're focusing on our core audience. I mean, core to whom? I mean, core. Core is a dog whistle, Brianna, for white, right? But that when we say core, what makes me is we're focusing on a core audience, meaning like Black, Hispanic, gay, lesbian, military, what have you. That's not core. And frankly, disproportionately, forget about just the sheer numbers, the influence of the market that's outside of it, it goes even beyond that. Anyway, Jason, I want to ask you, because you have been very involved in Publicis with something that's called the Once and For All Coalition. Love for you to talk a little bit about what that is, what that's grown out of, and then how does that tie back into, in many ways, what Aaron and Gonzalo and Brianna have already have outlined, because there is a commitment that you've made, and then Gonzalo, I guess you would be a natural follow-on to that in regards to the commitment that Group M has made, but how they are justifying, or what you're doing with the Publicis group of agencies to address this opportunity. I don't even want to call it an issue. I wanted to address this opportunity.
It's a really great question, and thank you for asking. So, with the Once and For All Coalition, we started this effort. I joined Publicis maybe about a year and a half ago or so. When I joined the organization, I think I entered a climate in which the questions we were trying to answer were quite flat. The questions around diversity were, what is the right percentage to spend with diverse suppliers? None of those percentages actually look accurate or feasible, in my opinion. The questions were about how do we respond to tactical RFPs from our clients to make sure we can do better work here. But we were also trying to answer an elephant in the room, which was like a big legal threat in the market to brands about whether they were spending properly or not. Like so that was like that was kind of the swirl going on in the ad industry at the time. And so I think what we did was we said, hey, trying to address this on a short-term basis, looking at things like, is 2% right? Is 5% right? Hey, should we be helping our clients figure out how to respond to like a public legal challenge? Is that the best way to do this long-term? Because listen, bitch, I'm like you, like real talk, like we have people on this panel here that have been doing this for 20 years and we still haven't seen the numbers go up. So it's like, hey, what's real change look like? And so I think what we said was, like, we got to stop talking to ourselves and let's do three things, right? One is let's not make this a agency versus agency or brand versus supplier or supplier versus agency scenario. let's actually create an open source solution where we have clients, any agency. So I want to be really clear. Publicis is just the orchestrator of it. It's not our effort. It's an effort of any agency. It's an effort of any brand. It's an effort of any supplier to actually sit together and mutually dialogue about what does it actually take to create sustainable change with regards to two things: properly investing with diversely owned businesses, which I actually think can be distinct from the second objective, which is properly driving business with diverse consumers. They're not always linked. And I think it's actually unfair to continuously link them, because we don't ask white-owned businesses to just target and make money with white people, right? So if you're a Black-owned business or you're a minority-owned business, you have every right to generate revenue from any audience out there, right? And so we said, hey, how do we get this open source collaborative scenario where we're not just talking in sound bites to Ad Age about, who's doing it better than someone else, right? Because we're all pawns in that game, and we just didn't want to be pawns. So the second thing we did was, hey, listen, let's try to figure out a couple of core goals that we'll get out of this. And that's something that we've been really proud of. First was, well, we can't spend enough, Butch, because there's not enough supply. We measured it all with Nielsen, so I can't find more rated inventory to buy. I'm maxing out. I'm all done. So one was, how do we get this core group of open source brands, suppliers, and agencies to think through how do we invest in creating more supply, right? Or at least unearthing more supply. Second was, hey, how do we solve best practices around how, and Butch, I know you poke at the agencies, but I'd be remiss to say that you have to remember the agencies, we're a conduit of our brand's interests, right? We're a conduit of our brand's financial circumstances, right? Like, my job is to figure out, how do I create an economically advantageous scenario for us to conduct business on behalf of what our clients want, right? So how do we create operational excellence that actually puts financial incentives, talent incentives, other operational models at the forefront, so there can actually be sustainable business operations to make this grow? And then the third, Butch, as you know, is look, we got to think about measurement differently, right? So if we're going to just keep going on about this, about how many Nielsen ratings can we get, what scenario plan can I pull up, it's just never going to really change. So we put our hat, and we've been doing some wonderful work with a number of research partners in the industry, a Nielsen, a ComScore, Adelaide. These are all partners within the coalition to just help us think differently about how do we communicate to our brands and to our supplier partners, what does success look like, sustainable success? Because at the end of the day, you have to move a metric. You either got to get products off the shelves. For Bree, you got to get cars off the lot. You got to get people to be loyal to your business, but you can't go on and on and on about, we want to do this because the population is growing or because it's the right thing to do. Like, you have to be able to show, what is the result, right? And so I'll close with this. We've gotten to a place now where we've got 30 plus clients that are involved in the coalition, a number of which are not Publicis clients. We've got 30 plus suppliers that represent diversely owned and targeted, because guess what? The targeted suppliers have a responsibility too. Yeah, they have a responsibility to not exploit this situation. They have a responsibility to the content creators that they monetize, that are Black and brown, right? So how do we get them engaged? And then we've also brought on actually some partner agencies that exist outside of Publicis to really help us guide towards, I'd say, 3 things we're super proud of. And these are all public. So, I mean, listen, of the clients that we do work with, if you're bulletin boarding to spend, they've all increased their spend versus the previous years at a 20% increase. I mean, that's pretty dramatic, right? And they've also diversified the kind of suppliers that they work with. That's the other metric you have to look at. It's not just how much more are you spending, it's about what does your portfolio of relationship look like? Because you can spend more with, I won't say the name, but the one supplier that every agency was trying to spend money with last year because they thought they were going to get sued. So, but can you diversify the actual suppliers that you work with? And we've seen 16% increase in what that portfolio looks like. We've launched 4 inventive measurement pilots that we plan on releasing all the results to the industry. And we hope every agency, every brand leverages the insight. You don't have to be a part of the coalition, because the whole goal, Butch and team, is like, if you keep trying to make this a competitive advantage, you'll never win. So like that's old school slavery stuff, right? It's like that, you know, the house Negro and the field Negro, like, we don't want to play that game. So it's like, whatever we produce, whatever we find in this research and our spending and our best practices, you know, those are all available for public digestion. And we just hope, Butch and team, that, you know, that this starts to create a scenario where when you go out and you pitch business or you secure business, you're more comfortable, you're more equipped to be able to start that business relationship with like some clear terms around how to hold each other accountable. Because if you don't have that, it can become a lot of lip service and just a lot of swirl. So yeah, thanks for asking, and I hope that's helpful for the group.
Gonzalo, you know, you have something similar that Group M is doing. And, you know, and again, I don't want to, Jason brought it up. He said, but, you know, you spend a lot of time beating up on the agencies, and I don't want to beat up on, I'm not beating up on agencies. I just want to hold agencies and clients accountable to making sure that they are not, that the spend is up what they should be spending, but quite honestly, that the agency itself, and all of you guys can, and I'd love to get Bree's point of view on this right after Gonzalo. How do you hold the agency accountable to look like the clients that it's serving itself, right? Because, you know, it's one thing to accept all of the facts that you outlined, Gonzalo, and you said, here's the demographics, and here's where it is from 18 to 34. Here's where it's going to be in 24, what have you. But the clients and the agencies also have to look and mirror that the markets that they're serving themselves. But let me not get into that. Love to have your point of view, your view, Gonzalo, a little bit about what Group M is doing, and this 2% situation, as well as sort of this both of you guys are working on this opt-in or opt-out scenario that you can or should be presenting to your clients in regards to spending with this diverse market. Go ahead, Gonzalo.
Oh, totally agree with you. And I think Jason made a very good point. As agencies, we are the conduit between clients and their goals and how we help them achieve that through, you know, the media investment and the media strategy and the communication strategy. That said, it's everybody's responsibility to drive this business to the right place. And to your point, make of this industry more inclusive, more diverse, and more equitable. And I think that as part of that responsibility, we need to be that voice going back to the clients and saying, this is what we think is right. If you agree, great, come on board. We're going to do it with you. If you don't, we just want you to be aware that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's when the whole opt-in, opt-out idea came out. And actually, we started this pledge, as we called it, and it was actually June 2021, so exactly a year ago. We sat down with clients and we said, we feel that any brand should be spending a minimum of 2% on Black-owned media. And I want to address the elephant in the room about the percentage. But we had this conversation in private. Why 2%? I'm not going to bore the audience with how we did the math, but the number, if it's not 2, it's 2.5. And that is based on how much money is being invested in the media industry as a whole, which is around 55 to 60 billion. How much of that available inventory is in the hands of diverse-owned companies, which including women-owned and all the different diverse categories, is a little bit less than 12%. So if you do a straight math, you're talking about around, and I'm going to check my notes because I don't want to screw up. It's around 6 billion of the available inventory that is today in the hands of any diverse-owned company. And Black-owned media, it's around 20, a little bit less than 25%. So whatever the way you do this math, it's going to give you that the available inventory of Black-owned media is the highest 1.5 billion. That represents, if you do the math backwards, 2.5% of the overall media that exists. So why is that small? Well, there's a history behind. We have not been supporting these companies. They were, the ones getting the crumbs sometimes, or being called in the last minute and not giving them the fair share. But today, where we're standing today, we truly believe that 2 is the minimum. From there, you can do more and do better. And that's what we've been communicating to clients. The other message is we believe everyone should be part of this. There's no reason not to be part of this. And that's why we are saying to clients, we're going to drive that investment for you. And yes, you just want to opt out. And if you want to opt out, that's cool. We usually ask why they want to opt out, and we've got different answers. I'm not going to share those because I don't want to, expose anybody. But that's what we are doing today. And the good news, to Jason's point, is we have seen a huge increase. Now, the numbers are so tiny that a huge increase happens very quickly. Are we at the fair share today? Not really. But we are in a very positive journey, and we're driving this to be long-term, to be part of the overall, to become part of the organic way we do business. So then you, Butch, as other Black-owned companies, do not need to keep knocking at the door every single month saying, hey, what about me? What about me? We want to establish these. We want to sit down and do commitments. Again, I truly believe that it's our responsibility to help those businesses stay in business. And we all know that many of these businesses shut down. We all know that COVID was tough, but it was tougher for these guys. And it's because many companies just pulled back, and the first thing they cut was their diverse spending and their multicultural spending. As I always say, we are the last ones to come in, the first one to come out. And we need to change that. How do we change that? Establishing rules of business that are different to the ones that we are used to. This has to be part of your regular communication strategy. If it becomes part of the regular investment strategy, and tomorrow your brand decides or needs to cut your budget, it cuts across the board. It doesn't cut one line, which is, again, the last one to come in, the first one to come out. So to your point, we are absolutely committed to that minimum 2% pledge that we made last year. We're going to communicate very soon that we're going to expand that commitment into all diverse-owned media. We're also going to communicate that we're establishing, specific partnership with many partners. And the whole idea, and Jason referred to this too, it's diversifying the partners we work with. And we also need to analyze who are those that have the capabilities, the inventory, the resources that can really work and provide, value to the clients. There are many partners out there, but we also need to understand that, again, as Jason said, we need to drive business for our clients. So it's our role to evaluate who those partners are. Not make a short list, try to operate with as many as we can, but also be sure that these partners are delivering. And I want to highlight one thing, because it's one of the things that I usually hear from many of, again, colleagues within our agency and clients: scale. The problem with minority-owned media is that there's no scale. That it is not true. If you have the right team in place and the right knowledge of how this industry operates, scale is not a problem. And I can guarantee that, because we have clients that are way higher than the 2% that we're talking about. We're talking about more than 5% just on Black-owned media with very large budgets. And we are achieving those goals, and we're not having a problem of scale. And I want to address that, because it's one of the first things that everyone says. Well, the problem with these companies that they're so tiny, we cannot drive scale. Not true. If you bring the right partners to the conversation, you do the right negotiation with them, and you put together a good partnership, they can absolutely drive the scale.
Gonzalo is absolutely right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
Go ahead, Bree, go ahead.
Gonzalo.
I'm just going to go to you because you are the client, and now they've been speaking, all of them, and Aaron will come right back to you. But because Aaron, you have a very unique perspective because you sat on the client side, you sat on the general market agency side, and now you've sat on the other side. But let me go to you first, Bree, because you're the client. You've heard what each of these gentlemen have said in regards to their commitment to or trying to bring clients on up to speed on this sort of 2%. General Motors made a very bold statement a long time. First off, General Motors have been doing this a long period of time, right? So in fairness to GM, GM's been doing this in excess of 50 years. So it didn't just happen because of a knee on the neck of George Floyd 2 years ago. This has been something you've been doing for a period of time. I would love to get your client perspective on what these gentlemen have talked about in regards to the agency, and what is the client's responsibility to hold the agency accountable. And then because many clients, and I'll include ourselves in that. My father used to say to me all the time, he said, Butch, if I end up at an ad agency, I got lost on my way to the client, right? So Black-owned companies knew the only way to get anybody's attention, right, was to go directly to the client, right? And then the client would go back to the agency and say, hey, what about, Black Enterprise? And I go, who? And they're like, yeah, we just had this fabulous presentation. And so it was sort of reverse engineering. Rather than going through the front door, you kind of came around the back door, and then it was kind of jammed down the throat of the agency. And then the agency, they didn't really particularly care for that as well, obviously. And then it became a contentious, relationship, unfortunately. But that was the only way we could kind of gain attention at the time. But I'd love to get, again, your point of view. And Aaron, you've got this unique, I've sat on all sides of the devil, right? And so you understand how this really works and how people navigate. Because quite honestly, my colleagues, and I'm going to put, I'm wearing two hats, one is CEO of Black Enterprise, but really in representing Black-owned media, my colleagues are frustrated, right? My colleagues in Black-owned media, minority-owned media, diverse media, however you want to, are frustrated because they don't know, they keep thinking the goalposts are moving. And they don't know who to present to, and are they going to be seen, or do they have the scale, all the things you guys have laid out. So anyway, let me go to you, Bree, and then to you, Aaron.
Sure. Let me attack that question in two phases. The first, operational, and then the second, I want to get back to the investment piece that both Gonzalo and Jason were speaking about. Operationally, in working with Kara, who's our agency of record nationally in MRG for local media, we have done a lot of work to ensure that we're baking into our planning process the time and space it takes for communication. We don't believe that no callback is right. We don't believe that a no, or for that matter, a yes without a call or feedback or something, that's not right. And not only is it not right from a professional courtesy standpoint, but if ultimately we're all seeking to grow this ecosystem, there has to be that moniker of communication and feedback and info sharing so that everybody does grow. So across the board, even myself, everyone at General Motors, even client side, we're read into this. For myself, I even have Third Thursdays, which is a dedicated block of time that I literally don't do anything else but make myself available to diverse owners for any questions that they may have, for any pain points that they may have that I can help with or quarterback through. That's important. And that's not the only window that I will meet with anyone, but it's just a window of time where diverse owners can count on my availability. And that's just me. I know myself and my colleagues all have our ways to improve the communication and dialogue. Now, as it relates to the agency side, same thing. We work very, very closely to ensure that as a part of how we move through the planning process, it acknowledges those pain points, and we find for us all for it as quickly as we possibly can. We're not perfect. We will never say that we're perfect, but the strive is definitely there. What I will say on the investment side of things is that the investment, be it a percentage, which ultimately ladders up to a dollar amount or otherwise, opt-in or otherwise, that is the root, right? The impact is the fruit. And so while we do focus on the investment, while that is very, very important and critical piece to things, there are other ways to enable the ecosystem that have been looked over for a long period of time that we want to unlock. So, you know, anything that we can do with our longstanding relationships, with whatever muscle that we may have in the marketplace or otherwise to unlock access, that's what we want to do. If you were able to join us for our second annual Diverse Owned Media Summit, we did announce a couple of ways that we were unlocking access, be it to industry leading conferences where iron can sharpen iron. A lot of the smaller diverse owned companies may not be able to send people to those conferences and may not be able to network and make those connections. And to think about things differently, right? To stimulate that growth in the ecosystem, to broaden their offerings, to even form partnerships, right? So we wanted to do away with that barrier and provide that access to those who attended, whether it be certifications, right? So at General Motors for media, we don't require for a diverse owned company to have a certification for us to do business. We just require that you be at least 51% diverse owned, but many other companies do require it. And so if we can, even though it's not a requirement of ours, if it's a barrier within the ecosystem, if we can help unlock that, we want to do that. So you may have also heard in that summit that we are reimbursing for that, for new and renewals, so that these diverse owned companies can have access. There are many other avenues that we're exploring, and to go through all of them would take everyone's time. But I do want to be clear, investment is the root, impact is the fruit. And we need to make sure that we are investing for the sake of impact, and that impact is growth. Growth client side, growth agency side, and certainly growth amongst diverse owners, and ensuring that they're able to broaden their offering, hire more people, grow, so that as we increase our investments, there's inventory there for us to buy. There are pathways forward so that we can keep this cycle going. That's how you impact systematic change, is that you enable it.
Thank you, Bree.
Just really quick one, because Brianne, she hit some amazing points, and hopefully you don't mind me just piggybacking on some of it, Bree, but
Sure.
And then I want to shut up, because I know Aaron's got some words of wisdom here, but just super quick is like, I just want to try to make sure I land it for the audience that listens to this. I think if you're going into the goal of this chat, which is how do we start to think more strategically about investing in Black media, I think you have to kind of get your mindset out of like polar participation, right? Like if that's your mindset of like, this is the agency's role, this is the client's role, this is the supply. Like if that's your mindset, it's going to be really hard to shake it. And I love what Bree was suggesting is like, it kind of made me think of these 3 points. Like how do you eliminate the barriers, right? Like you can't even do it. You can't even start now because there are just like so many barriers. And guess what? The barriers, the suppliers don't even know about the barriers because they've been hidden for so long. So you got to even unearth the barriers first, then you have to figure out how to address them. So I love Bree's point on barrier removal. Second thing is you want to try to get to a place where you have like behavioral change in the organization. Like I was talking with Butch about this one day, and I think you guys would maybe get a kick out of it, or maybe it's not funny, I don't know. But I was like, hey, if like part of what makes our jobs fun, right, is like, it's not just all using systems and tools. We do have to think, and we have to like be attentive, and there's an art to it, right? This is how Aaron is establishing such a great business. Part of the art is I'm sitting at home at night because I'm being lazy today, and I'm watching my Netflix show, or I'm watching my Hulu Plus show, and I'm so enthralled by it that when I go to the planning meeting, I'm like, why aren't we buying an ad against this Hulu Plus show? Because I watched it, right? So you have to kind of, so you go back to that opt-in scenario, the opt-in things that that Gonzalo's doing or any other agency's doing, all it's trying to do is say, hey, did you watch the show? Did you listen to the podcast? Can you talk about it at the water cooler? Because that might actually make you want to buy it. But if you don't even engage with this stuff behaviorally, like it ain't gonna come up. Like you won't find it, right? And then the last part is, man, Bree, you hit it. And I wish I had a number on this one. I don't, but I will tell you something that I have been really proud to see. Butch, if you did this call 3 years ago, you wouldn't have these 4 people at this level having this conversation. Maybe Aaron, because Aaron's boss, but the rest of us, you wouldn't have this because the talent, you have to have talent of color in leadership to move this ball. You have to have someone that is of the diaspora, that is of the culture, that has children at home, that understands the impact of not doing this properly. That is the person or people that you physically need engaged to move this ball forward. Because if you don't, it goes back to Butch's point. You literally have to walk into a room and you have to educate people on just what the stuff is. Like what is Drink Champs? What is Black Enterprise? Like what are these shows? Because I don't know what they are. I haven't even seen them. Why would I place media against this stuff? But if you incentivize, and that's what I'm liking now with the agency, client, and supplier, whatever relationship it is, I'm seeing more incentives around a talent that works on the business. Do they look like the people? Do they look like the audiences? And I think if you were to look at one thing, if you got this whole conversation, you go like, what can I really hold anyone accountable to? I have no problem suggesting that if you are truly committed, you should have an element of your business relationship that actually requires some element of diversity in the talent that works on the business. If that starts to happen at scale, I think you really start to see sustainable change. So sorry to chime in on the floor there, but I think Bree just got me kind of fired up around that behavioral change, the talent change. I think it's just super important and making sure you leverage those to start to break down these barriers that make it really difficult. I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm sorry, man.
Oh, no. What you just said was so inspiring, and what Bree said was brilliant. And I want to connect 2 things. One, I love what you're doing, Bree, because so much of the challenge, and we have to acknowledge that our industry has got systems in place that make it very difficult for Black companies of color, to actually succeed. And they don't have access to capital, the same kind of capital that everyone else has, right? They don't have access to some of the resources. And so, when you look at the actual data, 4% of the Black businesses actually survive, of startups actually survive. 20% of the Black population tries to start a new business, and only 4% actually end up succeeding. And so you have to start to unearth, why is that? What are the things that are keeping that from happening? Dentsu, an ad agency, did something that was really smart, which was they started to understand that cash flow was an important part of a business being able to succeed. You can't sit back, and it's not enough to say, hey, we're going to open the doors to everybody and we're going to be inclusive, but then not acknowledge the fact that some of these businesses can't carry a GM for 120 days. I don't know what your terms are, but you know what I mean? So Dentsu started to say, well, the vendors that we're going to work with, the diverse vendors that we're going to work with, we're going to make sure they get paid in 30 days, right? And so for smaller businesses, that's absolutely critical. And what Jason said, as it relates to making sure that there is diverse talent that talks not only about making sure that the inclusive part is there, but we have to lean into the E part of the DE&I, the equity part, right? It's not enough for me to be in the room now. I want to be in the room, I want to have a seat at the table, and I want my voice heard. I want people to understand that I have a vote and that I have a voice that should be listened to. I've talked about it in terms of the benefit for organizations. I've never had a client tell me they want me to be less innovative. And the thing about diversity is that it disrupts, right? It disrupts patterns. It disrupts the same way of thinking. And so when you have someone that is of a different culture, of a different, just different than the people sitting around the room, what ends up happening is you start to open your mind to new ways of thinking, to new opportunities, to new, business opportunities. And that's how you grow your overall value in the company. So Jason is 100% right. Having voices, and you can tell those companies that have gotten into problems where they've made a cultural mistake, it's largely because they didn't ask someone from the culture to chime in, or if they did have someone from the culture there, they did not empower them to have a voice and to help guide that. So I'm 100% with you on kind of what you're doing and why that is so critical for the success of a business.
It's having that lens there to help guide conversations. And you actually beat me to it, Aaron. Those 30-day payment terms are something that we're doing.
That's right.
In partnership with Kara, who's a Dentsu. And so, yeah, and I will tell you, that is probably, I'm not even going to say top 5. That's probably one of the top 3 things that diverse-owned companies say that they appreciate about our approach. It does help.
And guess what? You'll get more companies, more diverse companies wanting to work with you.
That's right.
Because they know you're going to.
That's right.
You're going to work with them.
It's about enabling it, right? Like we can't get in our own way. Now processes are in place for a reason, right? Let's pay respect to the fact that certain processes are in place for a reason. However, that doesn't mean that we don't have the fiduciary responsibility to every now and then review those processes and say, do they still work?
Right.
Are they still doing what they were intended to do? And if not, okay, let's figure out a solve for how we need to behave now. And the payment terms, especially for diverse-owned companies, is critical because, to your point, Aaron, carrying that volume of equity and holding that, right, for 120 days, 90 days, whatever it may be, could be the difference between being in business the next month and not. Could be the difference between being a part of that 4% or being a part of the larger 20.
Yeah.
Hey, Bree, I'm going to give you a point of levity on that same point. And then I want to ask Gonzalo a little bit about these same companies. But this happened even, with us, Black Enterprise. And so I'm not going to name the company, but it will be fairly obvious. But it's a credit card company who is a sponsor of some of our events. And now they have, in corporate America, which for our audience to understand, corporate America now has what they call a portal system. And the portal system is a way of not having to deal with, which makes sense from an efficiency standpoint, but not having to deal with day-to-day of, invoices in, invoices out, who gets paid, who doesn't get paid. It gets put into a portal system. It's automated, it's digitized, and generally they will come back and tell you the terms are 60 to 90 days. And so I said, listen, Black-owned companies can't afford to be fronting large corporate public companies 60 to 90 days. We have people who need to be paid in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And they were insistent, I'm sorry, this is the way it is. And so this is credit card company. So I said, okay, no problem, I understand. So you have 60 to 90 day terms on the credit, on paying us the sponsorship? And they said, yes. I said, no problem. So when I receive my bill from you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on the same 60 to 90-day terms that you're putting Black Enterprise. And they were, well, you can't do that. I said, no, because, I have a portal system at home as well. And my portal system does not allow for me to pay my, so when it comes in, when they call me saying on day 31, because they do call you on day 31, is there a problem? Is there something we can do? Is there, I said, no problem. You're in my portal system, and I'm waiting for the payment to come through the portal system that you have before my portal system will release you. And anyway, it was a funny exchange, and they got my point. But Gonzalo, you've seen this in so many, what I'll call them, the influencers market, right? And the younger market now who've got all these ideas and all the above, but there is a dual responsibility, right? So I'm going to turn the mirror back on ourselves as suppliers. There is a dual responsibility to actually perform at some level so that you can go back to the client and say, yes, we tried these 17 things and 4 of them didn't work out, but these other 13 did work out, rather than we tried these 17 young, entrepreneurs, influencers, these suppliers of sort, but none of the 17 actually could provide us back any feedback. So how are you working with, you spend a lot of time with Black and Latino and Asian and all the above, who are really brilliant folks, but there is a responsibility to perform. How do you address that, Gonzalo? How are you dealing with those folks directly and trying to address that?
It's tough. And I'm going to go back to something that Bree mentioned and Jason and Aaron also. There's a lack of knowledge and a lack of representation. So the two things do not help with the cause. Now, on top of that, we operate with processes that were created by people that were not representing all of us, and they have been around for decades, but the world has evolved, media has evolved, the audiences have evolved, but we are still operating with the same machine that was created decades ago. Which one of them is, how do we measure? And we know that measurement probably today is, under the spotlight, not just with diverse media or multicultural media. As a whole, everyone is questioning how we measure, what we measure. You probably saw something on the news about, the amount of ghost ads that are being counted on the CTV OTT space, as much as the lack of representation in many of the measurement companies, where if you have 20% of the population being Hispanic or 15% of the population being Black, do they have that same amount of people in their panels? The answer is no. So in the meantime, we're not being represented, which means we're not being measured, or if they are not accurately measured, worse than that, every Black or Hispanic or Asian, any of these groups, because they cannot identify them, they end counting for the white population. Because if I don't know you're Black, well, you must be white, which is, again, another horrendous thing in this industry. So the way we look at this is from different angles. The very basic one is, are you performing from a pure media perspective? If I make an agreement with you, Butch, and we agree that you're going to have these number of impressions delivered, whatever the metrics, click-through rate, whatever, in most of the cases, that is, I would say most of the companies can deliver on that. And we can track that through any of the systems we have in place. I think where the challenge comes to play is when, is this really helping my business? And I think somebody mentioned before, should we use the same KPIs that we use for overall media when we are working with diverse-owned media? I would say yes in some cases, not in all the cases. And one of the things I always talk to our clients is you need to be more flexible. Flexible in many ways. Number one, diverse media tends to concentrate on some type of media. So if you want to do TV only, well, it's going to be harder for us to drive that at a high percentage because there are not too many TV, Black-owned, Hispanic-owned companies. While if you are in the digital space, we have more chances to achieve that goal. And if you are in the audio space, we have even more chances. So that's one of the things we need to be more flexible. What is your media mix? And how do we adjust that media mix based on the available media? From a pure measurement perspective, we've been literally mostly concentrated on the media performance. And again, I think that is a fair and comparable way across the board. But we also need to understand that when we go into, is this really driving business? Is this helping on the amount of units I want to sell or the cars that Brie needs to sell? I think we need to start looking at where the measurement industry is going and ensure that as part of that evolution that measurement is having and the companies that provide those services are thinking about, the different audiences are included and the different media is included. So I've been saying for quite a long time that our role at the agency, more than being group and multicultural, is group and inclusion. Our role is to guarantee that all audiences are being included and all media is being included. If you drive that, then it becomes part of the overall and it's part of the organic way we operate. So when we're having a conversation, whomever that person is at the company about measurement, they understand that is measuring all audiences and measuring all media. So we all evolve at the same pace. Again, to your point about, how do we evaluate the effectiveness and efficiencies of diverse media? It's from a pure media perspective, but we also need to look at the other component, which is the effectiveness. It's not just about efficiencies. It's not about buying at the lowest CPM. It's not about buying, with, the cheapest rate that I can get out there. It's how effective that is for these different audiences. And that's a metric that sometimes is overlooked. And we need to bring it back to the conversation because it's not just about the efficiency and, buying media at the cheapest rate or at the lowest CPM. It's about the effectiveness that this media has. And going back to Black enterprise, you are very good at engaging the Black audience. That brings effectiveness that of course has to come together with some kind of efficiencies, but we need to look at the two parts of the equation. And I think that the measurement systems today, number one, they do not have that right representation, but not always measure that effectiveness in an accurate way.
Go ahead, Aaron. Thank you, Gonzalo. Go ahead, Aaron.
Here's the other thing that I would add to that, which is I think the industry, the advertising industry has to come to an awakening about what they are asking the agencies to do in terms of who's buying it. There is a relationship, an IP that I have developed that multicultural agencies, it's not just Black, it's Hispanic, it's LGBTQ, it's Asian, that have been doing this for years and have a level of expertise, have a level of knowledge. And as the world changes, as the consumer base changes, people can't expect me just to give that to the general market agencies and say, okay, here's all my information, here's how to do it, now go and do it. Particularly after, for years, they have been not denying that it needed to be done. It's that whole total market initiative, right? It's about, for them, it was about efficiency. Oh, don't worry, we're going to get everybody, as opposed to leaning in to those experts who have built a career and an understanding of what motivates these consumers that people are so desperate to latch onto now. So I think it's really important to start to have that discussion within these companies to make sure, particularly at the brand level, to make sure that the right people are buying it. If I have to get a pair of glasses, I don't go to my dentist, right? I go to my optometrist. So let us lean into those people who are experts in what they do and give them the opportunity. To Jason's point, if the consumer base is changing, by the way, why can't I actually be buying for general market as well? If that's the new market, I should have that opportunity to do that. And so, you know, that's going to be an issue that people are going to have to address and have to be open to making
Aaron,
these
you've had
systemic changes.
Aaron, you've worked on some campaigns where it started, where the assignment started.
Mhm.
Help us to and I'm going to be, raw about it. Help us to reach Black people, right?
Mhm.
Come up with some great creative, because we really know it's important, but come up with some great things. And you've done it, and then it runs, and they go, "Oh my God, this was really, really good." And then next thing you know, it's running in the general market, and now you're bringing in general market consumers, but you're not getting credit for it, because, in other words, you were assigned to do X. When it spills over and influences the African American market, or the Hispanic market, or the Asian market, or the white market, which is really what I'm talking about, when it influences that, there should be proportionally an opportunity for you to do work, because, I keep going back to, I'm stuck with one of Gonzalo's original points, which is this whole notion of, which I'm going to start to try to lose these words, the word general market, because what is general market? If in fact all of us make up, if you take what was the other is actually larger than the general. So what is really general? So it really should be called market, and let us compete. At the end of the day, here's what minority-owned media wants, or minority-owned companies want. They want an opportunity to have a fair hearing and to compete.
Right.
That's it.
Mhm.
I'm not asking for any extra credit. I'm not asking for things that are outside of it. Just give me an opportunity. When I say me, I'm talking about, minority-owned companies, whatever the other is that is outside of, quote, I love the term you use, outside of white and straight, and then it becomes everything else, right? So how do those of us that are not white and straight get an opportunity to walk through the front door rather than have to be pushed down through another door and compete and be an opportunity? You're never going to know the brilliance of Walton Isaacson unless you guys, I'm out promoting it, but unless someone else goes out and says, you know what, these dudes here, this is who you need to use. Because not only for what you do in the general market, but in our market, but I'm telling you, you're going to end up using them in all things. And there's this creative brilliance that we accept, that the country accepts. Whereas our culture is driven by this country's culture is driven by Black and brown people.
Mhm. Yep.
So it would be shouldn't it naturally flow that if the culture is driven by this and people want to engage and do what these folks are doing, why would it not follow that money would follow with the influence that we represent? Can you actually quantify that? Is there ability to quantify the influence of the Black and brown market on American culture as a whole? And why is there not a spend that is commensurate with it?
There is data that supports that. The question is, do the companies have the will to break down the traditional way, which Gonzalo was talking about, to break down the traditional way that they have been looking and working to start to reinvent how they reach these consumers? I got into a very heated conversation with a friend who was a CMO, and we were talking about millennials, and he was like, "Oh, Aaron, millennials are colorblind, and they don't." And I looked at him and said, "Well, hold on a second. When is being blind a good thing? Actually, millennials are color comfortable. They're color confident. they see color, they understand color. They don't understand anyone who doesn't. So maybe what you need to start doing is stop trying to water down what you're asking people to do. And maybe you need to start leaning into those cultures that may be driving your business. And maybe you need to be leaning into those agencies that understand that culture better than anybody else. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to get more butts and seats or sell more product. So you're right, Butch, that there is the data. There just has to be the will to make that change. And let's face it, people often are uncomfortable with making those changes or with that kind of, I talk to people all the time about having the courage to collide. It's about colliding with new ways of thinking, colliding with new ways of kind of approaching your business. That's the only way you're going to start to break down that, systemic way of working that is not going to ultimately help grow the business that you want.
Butch, on that, I think that both Jason and Brie said this. We need to change the behavior of how we do business. Companies need to change the infrastructure they have, because if you have more diverse people, they're going to understand this. If that becomes the scale that it should be, it becomes a much more natural conversation. Now, I want to say one thing. You mentioned we usually need to get, through the back door. I would say we need to get through the chimney, or we used to get through the chimney, dress as Santa Claus for somebody to pay attention to us. The good news, and again, for all the wrong reasons, is that now, for the very first time in my career, I'm seeing those people knocking at the front door and saying, please help me. I haven't done this. I don't know how to do this. And I truly believe I need to do this. So please help me out. What I want is to guarantee that this is not just a trendy thing that is going to disappear whenever we hit, a bad economy. And all of a sudden, all we have built in the last 2 years and all this consciousness that we've seen across corporations in doing the right thing, as Bree said, does not disappear right away, and it stays and it becomes something that is sustainable in the long term. But again, I feel extremely positive because I'm seeing the client saying, I want to be part of this. Yeah, I screwed up. I didn't do it. I missed it, whatever the case it is. But now I want to do it. And I want to be part of that journey. What we need to do now is to lock it so we don't lose it whenever things start going in a funky direction.
Let me say this. This has been an extraordinary conversation, right? And I appreciate the candor all of you having this. And we have thousands of people who are watching this who need to take, I want them to be able to take away a tidbit, a soundbite, or something that, an action step that they can do in this journey, right? Whether or not they are, a client, whether or not they are a supplier, whether or not they're working at an agency or they're working in a corporation, but that they can lean into this conversation on the importance of this. So I'd like each of you, I'm going to give each of you a minute to provide some words of wisdom or what you think is important for people to focus on as next step. Because we could do this, this time has gone by very quickly, but we're all passionate about it because we understand how, and each of us come at it in its own unique way, but we're all a part of the ecosystem of recognizing that as we're not just, what the commercial used to say, we're not just, we don't just own the company, we're actually, we're users, right? We're the hair club, right? We're also customers, right? So each of us are customers in our own ethnicity, our own sexuality, our own whatever it is that we are. We all feel what that is, and I think it's important. And I'm glad all of us are on this, but it's important for the folks that are listening to us that may be in the majority at the moment, population-wise, to understand the importance of being able to actually have a face-to-face conversation on this. And that may seem trite, but I listen to some of my salespeople who say they get onto some of the agency calls or client calls, and the people won't even show their face in the Zoom presentation. They disrespect them enough to say, I'll be on to listen to your presentation, but I'm not even going to show you my face. I'm turn my audio off, I'm turn my camera off. Or you ask to go and have a meeting. And as Gonzalo knows, when they asked me, they say, oh, do you want to have this? I said, nope. Where's your office? I don't care if it's on Pluto, I'm coming to it. Right? Because I want you to see me and feel me, right? And so what we're asking for, again, is that inclusion, which I love that word more so than multicultural, but this inclusive part. But let me throw it to you, Bree, and then I'll go to Bree and Jason and Aaron, and then you, Gonzalo, to give your sort of last words of wisdom on this topic and what we should do next.
Sure. I would say the very first step is that companies, agencies, diverse owners of media entities and companies, the very first step is to do a self-scan, right? Like, are we really and truly and authentically committed to the journey? Because that's what this is. This is a journey. We are course correcting for things that should have been long ago. So we all are on this journey to do that. And you have to have that. If you don't have that level of commitment going in, then none of what the rest of any of us are going to say is going to matter. So that's the very first step. The second thing is you gotta look at what your investment will be relative to that commitment. And as soon as you identify that, you got to bring along its twin brother, which is, what is the impact we're in it for? Yes, the investment is super duper important, but not every facet of this is something that we can just throw money at the problem. There has to be a real commitment to what that impact will be. What are you unlocking? What are you bringing to the table to pull forward and to give access to? What are you doing to drive the systematic change and break down those barriers that once were, so that we can have a more inclusive environment to all live and work and be communicated to in. Those are the pieces, and you can't have any of those conversations apart from one another. It really has to be 1, 2, 3. And then once you do all of that, you have to make sure that everybody in your organization, top down, is read into that, is a believer of that, and is marching in that direction. This isn't groupthink. This isn't me saying that everybody has to do something in this specific box. But what I am saying is that you have to have an inclusive mindset to where even if somebody challenges or says, hey, I have a different idea on how to get this done, you don't close the door, you open it. You invite them to sit down and you have a conversation, cameras on. So that's what I would say needs to be done across the board. And I do believe that if we all do that, all of us, it's going to take everybody, I do believe we're going to see the change that we want to see.
Thank you. Jason?
That's incredible, Bree. That's incredible.
Tough act to follow, Jason.
I know, gosh, that was unfair. I thought we were going to close with Bree. Jeez. So gosh, I'm going to be as polite as I can and try to follow that up. But first things first, Butch, listen, I want to tell the people within your organization, they don't get to see the work you're doing. Maybe they do, I don't know, that you're doing outside of Black Enterprise. Like, and you keep referencing the 2 hats you're wearing. Yes, you are wearing a Black Enterprise hat, but I got to tell you, man, like, you haven't, the only reason I'm here is because of you. Like, you inspire me. I don't like getting on and doing these public things, but like, you have really challenged the industry to collaborate, to work together. I mean, the contributions you brought to the coalition alone, there's no way we would be where we are literally if you personally weren't involved. So I just want to say that aloud is I just feel so grateful to have someone like you in our industry that is just so open-minded, but so determined to see long-term change. So just huge thank you, number one. Really quickly, the three things that I've been thinking on hearing Gonzalo and hearing Aaron and hearing Bree, I mean, you guys are so brilliant that I imagine would be a really good reference for a future state. You know, one is like, if you're a business, really challenge yourself to think about how do you stay in business and how do you grow and sustain in the next 5 years? Figure out like, what does that look like for you? Because you have to identify, what is my business need in the next 5 years, at least, right? Then I think if you get that, you can start to have better dialogue with folks and create a better roadmap. I think the second thing is you have to create behavioral incentives within your relationship model. Your behavior might be who you hire. Your behavior might be how you spend. Whatever that behavior is, you have to have behavioral incentives, because leadership, what they worry about is the QBR they have with their boss. Did I hit my metrics? Did I hit my goals, right? So what are your behavioral incentives that you're putting in play with your relationships? And then I say the very last thing is, what are your collaborative incentives? How do you actually incentivize your business model to truly be collaborative? You hear Bree talking about having the regular meetings with the diverse suppliers. You talk about, Butch, I hope you agree with this, but how we're pushing our clients, listen, to meet, actually encouraging to go through the back door. Butch, go and meet with Butch, go meet with diverse suppliers, go talk to them, because if you're not collaborating, you can't learn, and then you don't actually see the intrinsic value of what we're doing. So, think about your business in the next 5 years, get that roadmap, create the right behavioral incentives so that you have something to map back to, and then create a culture of collaboration so that you're learning and growing together. And, back to Gonzalo's point, really going all in on this as a group. So those are my thoughts, but thanks a ton for having me. And I'm just happy I got a chance to be here with all of you guys today.
Aaron?
Well, first of all, this has been an amazing panel. Thank you, Butch. Every time I'm with you, I learn something new. I'm inspired. And so it's what keeps me going. I guess I have a couple of things that I would suggest. First of all, we have to start to lean into the equity part of the DE&I conversation, and every company needs to be very clear about that. It's no longer just good enough to hire people of diverse backgrounds, but you need to make sure that you are giving them the resources, the authority, the voice to do the very thing that you brought them in to do. And I say this to clients when we're talking about, and they always reach out and they're like, how do we do DE&I better? And my response is, you don't do DE&I, you live DE&I. It has to be a part of everything you do. It has to be a part of the entire ecosystem, because one part of that doesn't work, that doesn't believe in it, can stop the dominoes, right? So it is incumbent upon you to make sure that those values are throughout the entire corporation, throughout your ecosystem, throughout your supply chain, so that you ultimately get the best thinking, you ultimately get the best work from the people who understand how to deliver that. And part of your job as a leader is to make sure that you are removing those barriers that have prevented that great thinking from infiltrating your organization. And that, to me, is how you win. Consumers are paying attention to that. They're not just paying attention to the products, they're paying attention to how you are working within your own organization. They're looking at the numbers, they're paying attention. And at the end of the day, they will support those organizations that are connected to their values. And so it's a great way to win. It's a great way to walk into the office every day and feel like you are, doing something great, not just for the company and not just for yourself, but for the people that you're working with. So thank you again for including me. This was an awesome experience.
Thank you, Aaron. And Gonzalo?
Put me in a tough spot, Butch, on this one.
Well, you're gonna do cleanup. You're gonna do cleanup.
After hearing these guys, it's like, number one, thank you, Butch, for putting this together. And third, thank you, Bree, Jason, and Aaron, for the inspiration. I know we're kind of preaching to the choir, between all of us together, but I would say three things. Number one is identify your allies. And your allies might be not just the people within your company. It might be, people at the agency, if you are part of a media company, or it could be a client that might talk to the agency and build a bigger case. Again, the sum of the parts is always larger than just each of the individuals. And look for allies in places that you probably didn't think about, which could be, PR, it could be news, it could be an influencer, it could be an association, it could be the 4As, the ANA. Look beyond what you're used to, find those allies, work with them, make the case even bigger. The other one is, make everyone to publicly commit. We need to make this something bigger than the things we represent. We need these to become part of something that make people uncomfortable. I always say the same. I may not be welcome to all the meetings, but I say the things straight on the face. And if we need to expose, let's expose. It's part of the game. And the last one is, it's more for the different individuals that we represent. Make your voice be heard. It's your right. Nobody in today's corporate America is going to fire you if you make your voice loud and clear. And by the way, request for inclusion and representation. It's our right, and it's the responsibility of the companies to do that. So again, we are in a very special moment. Let's take advantage of it.
Thank you. Let me say a few things. One is, I want to personally thank each of you, Bree and Jason, Aaron, and Gonzalo. I selected this panel. And I selected this panel, and I did because I selected people who I knew who would lean in and who are authentic and come at this subject in an authentic way, right? Because a lot of these things end up getting whitewashed. They end up being, people have conversations, or they just have, they'll have, panel discussions just for the sake of having panel discussions, or it'll be, I was on a board meeting yesterday, it's Pride Month, so let's do something. It's Black History Month, so let's do something. And then at the same time, which you guys would find, funny, but not funny, they were like, oh yeah, it's Pride Month. I said, well, what are we doing about Juneteenth? And they were, Juneteenth? And I said, yeah, it was made a national holiday last year. And now we're in this, like, oh man. So it's almost like, what months, is there any days or months that you guys don't have something? It was literally like that was like a fly on the shoulder. And I was like, I find it ironic that we have a month, or we have a day, or we have something that becomes disruptive to the way of life that you would like it to be, rather than celebrating those things. But that said, all of you guys have leaned in. I personally appreciate that on behalf of Black Enterprise. Thank you all very much for your words of wisdom and for this panel discussion. And for the audience as a whole, I hope you've taken away these pearls of wisdom that have been given, and that you are a part of this journey with us, because this journey is not about, it's really not about Black-owned media. It's not about diversity-owned media. It's about what's right to do for this country as a whole, because we can enrich this country if we're inclusive of everyone. And we spent no time today, thank God, we spent no time today talking about politics, right? Because it's depressing to even go down that path to discuss that. But we're bigger than this, and business can play a more important role than worrying about whatever the political infrastructure is that's underneath that, right? Business can change things. Business can hire people. We can change those things, because business sees what's happening. It's the tidal wave that's coming, but it's already here. right? The tidal wave of the inclusive market is so important. So again, on behalf of Black Enterprise and behalf of our audience, thank you, right? Thank you. God bless you all for participating. And I appreciate your commitment to this very, very important journey. God bless you all. Thank you
so much.
What a powerful session. Hi, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP and Executive Editor at Large for Black Enterprise. Thank you for joining us for our latest Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Virtual Town Hall. Black Media Matters. Are corporations delivering on economic equity pledges? We hope you're leaving tonight's discussion with a deeper appreciation for the importance of corporations, the ad agencies that represent them, and the role that we as Black consumers can play to ensure the growth of the media outlets that speak for and represent us. Remember, you can log back in to watch the playback of today's town hall on demand. And don't forget to share on social media using the hashtag #BeTownHall. Thank you to our moderator, Black Enterprise CEO Earl Butch Graves Jr., and our panelists for sharing their expertise, perspectives, and both lived and professional experiences in the advertising and media business. Be sure to join us in New York next month, July 21st, for our first ever Future of Financial Services Summit, FinTech, Cryptocurrency, and Black Wealth, sponsored by Prudential and Walmart. And get ready for the return of the Black Men Excel Summit, hosted by FedEx as a live in-person event in Baltimore, October 12th through 14th. For the latest information on all of our upcoming events, both in-person and virtual, go to blackenterprise.com/BE events. Again, thanks for joining us and have a great evening.